Maddy is a strategic designer currently working as an Adobe Creative Resident. Her focus is UI UX design in the wellness space. Empathy, cognitive psychology, and digital well-being are all driving forces behind her work. Take it away, Maddy.
Okay, go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so today what we're going to be doing is going through a couple different kind of fun micro animations within XD. But since many of you are brand new to XD, I want to start out with just a super quick introduction to Auto Animate. And so what we're going to do is I've got this artboard here. This is just a blank iPhone 10 template. And what I'm going to do is create a circle. So I'm just going over to the shapes panel, selecting circle, and then to make sure that it is a perfect circle, I'm holding down shift. All right, then I am just positioning it kind of in the middle here, and we'll make it green so that it's easy to see. Okay, so this is going to be just about the simplest thing you could possibly do with Auto Animate, but I think it's just a really good way to see how it works. And that way you'll understand exactly what you can do with it and how to push it to its limits. So we have one artboard here, and the way Auto Animate works is it actually animates the difference between two artboards or states. And we'll deal with artboards first, and then I will get into states because artboards is really kind of the simplest way to explain it. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this artboard, and I'm just going to hold down Option and Shift and pull this over so that we have another artboard that looks exactly the same. Now, what I'm going to do is just manipulate the circle in some way. So let's maybe bring it all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to make it really tiny like that. Maybe even we can make it look kind of flat. Okay, cool. So now we have this shape that appears in these two different artboards. And what's important about this is that they have the same name in the layers panel. So over here, down here, you can see we have our document assets, and right below that, we have our layers panel. And very, very simple. We have one layer, and it's this ellipse, and it automatically named it ellipse 14. We're going to go with that. We come over here. Let's make sure this has the same name, ellipse 14. All right, we're good to go. And that will always happen if you just duplicate the artboard and then make the change. So that's the easiest way to do it. All right, so we have our two different artboards set up. Now I'm going to show you what Auto Animate does to animate in between. I'm going to go into prototype mode up here next to design mode. And I'm going to click on this circle. And if you see here, there's a little arrow. So I'm going to click and drag that wire over to the next artboard. And so now we see that this pops up. We have a little interaction panel. And what it did was, since I selected an element on the screen, it automatically selected tap as the type of trigger. And so we're going to go with that. So basically it's saying when this circle is tapped, what's going to happen. So we're choosing Auto Animate, which is exactly what this quick little tutorial is all about. And we're going to do maybe easing. We'll do ease in and out, and we'll do a duration of 1 second. So it's really easy to see what's happening here. Okay, cool. So now to preview what we've just set up, I am going to select this artboard that we're starting from and go up to this play button. Okay, so now, like I said, we're going to click on the circle and let's see what happens. Okay, cool. So that is, again, so simple, but you're all seeing how this works. Basically, it auto animates the difference. So it goes from this big circle on the top, and you can see it actually shrinking and going to the bottom. And that is the whole purpose of Auto Animate. All you have to do is move items around. You can manipulate the size, things like that, and the shape even. And Auto Animate will help you kind of do the rest. So with that out of the way, let's get into some of the more fun micro interactions that I've got planned. So, like Andre mentioned, my focus throughout the Adobe Creative Residency is wellness projects and UI UX specifically in the wellness space. And so, if you've sort of been following around a bit, you might have seen my first case study that I did, which is for this smart diffuser app that I named Essence. And so essentially, it's an app that will pair with your essential oil diffuser to let you set up rituals. So basically, maybe you want to maybe you want to set up a ritual where every day at 5 o'clock, a really relaxing oil will start to diffuse to get you to log off of your computer, maybe start winding down from work. So that's sort of this whole project that I did. And I bring that up because each of these little scenarios that we're going to go through are micro interactions that I designed specifically for that app. So if you want a little bit more context, you can check this out on my Behance. Okay, so now this should make a little bit more sense. What we're seeing here is basically a representation of your diffuser. And so the way the diffuser works is there are 6 slots that you can drop little essential oil bottles into. And based on the weight, the app will recognize that you have an essential oil in there, and it will kind of instruct you on, based on the rituals you'd like to set up, which essential oils should you put in each slot. And so this screen is from a setup screen where it's saying, okay, load eucalyptus into slot 3. And so it needs to see that you have loaded it right into the correct spot. And so that's what it's prompting you to do on the screen. So what I was thinking would be helpful is if slot 3 was kind of glowing a little bit so that you could see which one it was and then know exactly what you need to do. So it would just call a little bit more attention to this particular slot. So the way we're going to do that is with a fun little glowing button micro interaction. So I'm going to just zoom in here, and basically we're going to keep the rest of these white, and we're just going to take this circle that I created. Oh, we got to go back into design mode to do this. We're going to take this circle that I created, and instead of it being white, we're actually going to go over to the fill section, and we're going to do a linear gradient. Oh, no, we're going to do a radial gradient, excuse me. So for this radial gradient, I think what I want is to look over here in my document assets and look at these colors that I have. And so if you're brand new to XD, you might not know this is the assets panel where you can really easily save colors and character styles and components so that you can reuse them later. So I'm going to use these that I've already set up, and I'm going to select on this side, which is going to be the middle. I'm going to grab this red color, and then on the outside, I'm going to grab this orange color. Awesome. And so that's a little bit dark. And so I think what I'm going to do is select on this orange one again and just bring it down a little bit like this. Okay, cool. And now I want to make this 3 white instead so that it stands out from the rest. And so, okay, that looks okay, but it looks very brown and kind of drab. So we're going to do something else to make this look better. So we're going to actually use blending modes. So instead of just a normal gradient color, what I'm going to do is come and let's try hard light. I think we're going to go with hard light for this one because as you can see, it's very dim at this point, but it kind of looks like a glowing button. Okay, so this is part of what we want, but like I said, it's kind of dim, and we want to have 2 different scenarios here that can kind of auto animate in and out of one another so that you can actually see that it's glowing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, select this circle, and actually copy and paste it so that there are 2 of them. And then I'm just going to do command left bracket until it goes behind that 3 so that the 3 is right front and center. And then we have now 2 different layers. And because we have this blending mode on, two layers on top of one another make this nice and rich instead of really dim like that looks. And so this is awesome. This is definitely more glowing. So what we want maybe is for it to go back and forth between looking like this, and if we just decrease the opacity completely, then maybe it will look like it's glowing. And so that's what we're going to do in Auto Animate. So what I'm going to do is select this artboard and copy and paste it over here. And in this artboard, this top circle is going to be 100% opacity. And on this one, it's going to be 0% opacity. Okay, cool. So now what we have to do is hop into prototype mode, and instead of having a tap trigger, what we want to do is actually set up a time trigger so that these fluctuate back and forth between one another without me having to do anything. So we're going to do a time trigger, and we don't need a delay on this because once it hits the right, this artboard, we just want it to go back and forth with no delay. So we have auto animate, we have the correct destination, which is this artboard, and I don't think we need any easing. And we're going to do 1 second. I think that will be good. Okay. And then, like I said, we have to drag this wire back to the start so that it will go back and forth. And as you can see, it remembers all of my settings, so I don't even need to do anything here. Okay, so now let's preview this prototype. I'm going to kind of scooch over so you can see when the preview pops up. Okay, so I know it's subtle, but do you guys see what I mean here? It's a blinking light that really is kind of showing you exactly where to put this essential oil into the diffuser. So there is our very first micro interaction. As you can see, it may kind of take you some practice to get this right, but it's really simple, and you can use this technique to do a bunch of different things, maybe with glowing buttons. So before we move on, Andre, are there any questions in the chat that we should be talking about?
So there's no questions in the chat, but there's questions from me. So,
All right.
I'm an older guy, so I remember Adobe Flash. I don't know if anyone remembers that. So we could do these type of animations with like a timeline. So when you're doing multiple animations on one say element or screen, does it work that way as well? Like say you wanted to have number 5 and number 3 glowing at the exact same time with different colors, does it automate like that, or do you have to do individual animation flows for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you can absolutely do that. Do different ones. The one thing that gets a little tricky when you're doing a time trigger is that you can't also do a tap trigger. So
Okay.
I really like using this time trigger because whenever I'm showing it in my case study or even sharing a screen on Instagram of what I'm creating, I like to show that this is what would happen. And of course, I would also share this with my developer to show them what it should be like.
Okay.
But when you're actually like maybe testing a prototype, this type of thing isn't super testable. It's really just to show what the UI should be doing. But on the other hand, if you have tap triggers, you can have as many as you want. Sometimes they'll be going to different artboards. Sometimes they could be switching a component back and forth between states, which we're going to look at in a bit. And so with the time trigger, it gets a little tricky, but with all of the other triggers, yes, it's super, super simple to do multiple.
Awesome, that's cool. So
Cool.
there isn't any more questions, but
Awesome.
yeah, people are saying it's pretty cool. Love it. So you can continue on and just
Let's
message
move
me
on.
anytime you want me to ask questions.
Okay, so yes, we have a couple more to get through, so let's do this next one. So this also is a screen from one of my apps. And so this is what we're going to do when we're setting up a ritual. So this person wants to set up a de-stress ritual. And so they've chosen to do 2 drops of eucalyptus oil, 2 drops of lavender, And what we're going to be dealing with here is the when. So I'm going to show you guys how to create a time trigger or a time picker. And so yeah, that's what we're going to do now. And so I'm really going to kind of use some of the elements that we already have. So I'm going to go in to this group. As you can see, this is grouped, but to tap into the group, I'm going to hold down Command. And so I've just selected this rectangle. I'm going to do Command C for copy and paste. So now I've got the right radius here. I don't have to manipulate that. And I've got the right height as well. So I'm going to make this, let's do like 110 for the width. And so this is where we are going to have our time picker. So again, I'm going to just grab in here and grab this number style. So let's just quickly kind of get all the elements we need for a time picker. I think for this, I'm going to do either like 5 o'clock or 5:15 or 5:30. We're going to do it in increments of 15 minutes. But for now, we're just going to kind of place all these items, and you'll see why I have 3 different text boxes for these in a moment. So yeah, we'll just make sure that is looking centered. Okay, perfect. Looking pretty centered. So now what we want to do is we want to actually have these numbers roll, and whenever you click on what we're going to have here, which is going to be a little triangle button, we actually want them to kind of move, and you're going to be able to see like an old-fashioned timer, the numbers moving. So first, let's go in here and create this button, which is going to be an arrow button here. We're going to have one over here, and then we can just copy and paste these down here. And because I'm a perfectionist, we're going to make sure that all of them are 2 pixels away from this main rectangle. Okay, awesome. So we have this so far, and like I said, I want these numbers to kind of roll through. So what I want, instead of just having 5 here, I actually want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That should be enough. And we'll put it up to 5 for now. And so, like I said, we're going to have them kind of, as you press the button, it's going to switch up to the next time. And so what we want, once we mask this out, we actually don't want these to show. And so I'm going to select all of these and increase the line height a bit. That way we actually won't see the 4 or the 6 in this rectangle whenever we have just the 5 in there. Okay, so cool. We have this, and I'm going to bring it to the front of our canvas. And so right now, this looks crazy, but let's work with masks to make this actually what we want. So I'm going to create a mask by going over and choosing the rectangle tool. The shortcut is also just clicking R. And what I'm going to do is create this mask just by making a rectangle over the part where I want this item to show through. Then I'm going to select both. I'm selecting this long chain of numbers. I'm holding down Shift and also selecting the rectangle. And the shortcut for mask with shape is Command Shift M. So that's what I'm going to hit. You can also go up to Object and find it there too. And so what we're going to do now is double click into here. And look, now you can see, you can move these around, and whichever one you've got in there is the only one that's going to show. So this is kind of the situation that we want. So now we're going to actually copy and paste this over here and do the same exact thing, but of course with some different numbers. So like I said, I think we want to do like, oops, I think we want to do 0, 0, 15, 30, 45, and back to 0, 0. Okay, and these are super wonky, so I'm just going to bring them back into the middle, and we'll put it at 15 right now. Okay, awesome. So now what we've got is 5, 15. So let's see, maybe we want for whenever the person who's using this clicks the up arrow to denote earlier, then what we want to do is have this switch to here. So let's create that using Auto Animate. Again, we're going to duplicate this artboard and we're going to come over here. We're going to pretend that they've just clicked this arrow. And there we go. So now, in order to actually wire that up, what we need to do is go into prototype mode, select on this button that they will have pressed, and drag the wire over to this artboard. And then what we want to do is make sure that we've got all of the right interactions. So tap trigger, that's correct. Auto animate, yep. Easing, let's see. I think it would be cool if it like snapped. We'll see what that looks like. And for this, 1 second's going to be pretty long. So let's do 0.3. Okay. So now, again, I'm going to preview this and we'll see if it works how we want it to work. There we go. Awesome. So what you can do is basically do as many of those as you want. So let's do a couple more. We're going to move this over a bit, go back into design mode, and maybe this time they click the down arrow, and so we want 6 o'clock to show up. That's a little wonky, huh? There we go. Almost. There we go. Okay, so then we have to wire that up. So back into prototype mode, maybe they're clicking the down arrow to get to 6. And then we're just keeping all of these same things. And so now we can go back to the very beginning and watch these two. So there we go. And there you have it. So there's our time picker, but we don't have like an AM, PM thing going on. And that's kind of important, right? We need to know if it's AM or PM. So what I'm going to do is create a switch. And so I'm going to, again, back to design mode. I'm going to take this rectangle and copy and paste it over here about 10 pixels away. And maybe it doesn't need to be quite that big. We'll make it a bit smaller. And this is going to be the outside of our switch. So let's make a little notch for the switch. We're going to do copy and paste, and we'll make this green so that we can actually see it. Why can't I make it green? Oh, because we're on screen. Okay, that's not what we wanted. We wanted on a normal blending mode. Okay, perfect. So then we're just going to make this take up about half of our shell here. And we're going to leave just a pixel on each side. And then what I like to do is kind of make this mirror the outside so that it's really nice and smooth. Okay, awesome. So this is part of our switch. And now, of course, we need some words. So we have AM, and I think that whenever the switch is on, it should be white because that contrasts better with the green. Then I'm going to bring this over here, going to make it black and PM. Okay, perfect. So we'll just kind of make sure these are aligned nicely. And here we have our switch. But what we want to do is actually make this so that it can switch back and forth. And there's a way easier way to do this than creating all of these artboards. So what we can do is just focus on this one artboard, and we're going to make this into a component. So in order to do that, first I have to group everything. So I'm going to select everything, Command G to group, and then Command K to make it into a component. And as you can see, it brought it over here to our components section. And so when you have a component, it will have a couple different states. It's going to have a default state and then as many states as you want to add to it. So this default state is where AM is on, but let's make another state where we have PM. So for PM, we want to make sure that we're selected on PM and we're going to make the changes that should apply to that. So I'm just dragging over this square, this rounded square. Then I'm going to select PM, make it white, select AM, make it black. So now, if you can see, we're going to select this component, and as you go back and forth, you can see exactly what each state's going to look like. So that's about half of it. Now we have to actually wire it up so that it works with Auto Animate. So what we're going to do is go into prototype mode. And now we want to set up where if you click on PM, so I'm just going to double click until I'm only selected on PM. Then how you set this up is a bit different. So instead of clicking and dragging this, what you want to do is just click it. And then it's going to make this little wire. And that way, what you can do is add a tab trigger and you can select a state this time. So we're going to select the PM state. And I think snap in 0.3 seconds is going to be good. Okay, awesome. Now what we want to do is the exact same thing with AM. So I'm going to go into the PM state, double click until I get AM, single click on this wire, and choose going back to the default state. Okay, awesome. Now we can go back into design mode. We can preview this, and now you can see we have a perfectly good switch. And what's great about this is now this component has those states and those auto animations set up so that what I can do is actually drag this. Maybe I want it over here. And now if we select that one, then it still carries over. We can copy and paste it as many times as we want on as many artboards, and it's going to keep those same properties, which is really awesome. Okay, so we have a bit more time, so I'm going to show you guys how to do a custom switch. So Andre, unless there are any questions, I'm going to...
We got a few questions,
Okay.
Maddie. This is really cool. Okay, so back to the first one that we did.
Sure.
There's a general question, just wanted to know from Anna, is that how do you explain this? Like, how do you explain like the transition working? Does XD provide JavaScript code, like export JavaScript code that you can give to a developer? And you don't have, if you don't know this one, this is kind of like out of the realm of the designer
Sure.
title. So yeah, go ahead if you can answer that.
Yeah, so I don't know fully the answer. And so, yeah, you would have to do a little bit of Googling, but I do know that with the most recent update to XD, the developer specs are much, much more detailed. So I'm not sure if there's Java, but there's definitely enough information where they would be able to see, the difference between these and sort of be able to understand from a development perspective how to achieve it. And so I mostly use this for showing kind of what I want to do. And usually a developer will know from seeing something how to make it happen. But that's a really good question. I would be curious exactly how specific the dev specs get in terms of this type of thing.
Yeah, from my experience, I know that JavaScript is a very tedious language, but it's very similar. Like when I used to use Adobe Flash, we had to create our own JavaScript type called ActionScript. So I'm guessing they're probably going to work at it, but I don't think there is. All right, so back to your next situation.
Cool.
What is a good resource where people can learn how to auto animate and prototype in XD?
in XD. So there are tons, oh my gosh, tons of resources. Adobe Live on Behance is a really good place to learn auto animate.
Yeah.
I have some YouTube videos about it, and I know that people in the XD community like Howard Pinsky and Andrea Epi also have great YouTube videos about it, and they're also both on Adobe Live. So yeah, all those things are completely free, and there's tons of different ways to learn how to do
Awesome.
it. And I'd
So,
also recommend
what
playing around and sort of experimenting with new ways that you like, new ideas that you can bring to it.
cool. So, if you do have some time, maybe afterwards, you can put some of those resources that you know of in like our Slack. So, if anyone wants more
Sure.
information, just go onto our chat and our Slack channel and go into general and start, asking away any more questions that you have. One last question before I let you continue. Is there any way to simplify the number artboard you need to create for the time picker? Or
Yeah.
would we have to do an artboard for each hour, then each minute in a combination?
Yeah,
How do you?
that's a really good question. So, in terms of simplifying, yes. So, what I'm going to do is get rid of these, and I'll show you this quickly, and hopefully, you'll kind of understand how to keep going with it. So, what I usually do is something to just show the like basically show what you should be doing so that when I'm testing, someone can experiment with it, but all the options aren't available. If you wanted to do a test where all the options were available, you could 100% do that within one artboard. So what I'm going to do is very similar to what I did with the switch. I'm going to group all of these, make them a component, and then what you can do is create states for every single option that you want. And so what I could do is new state for 415. And so then I would make sure that I'm selected on 415, and I would jump in here and do this. And I would pretty much do that for every single option.
That's
And that would sort of, take care of it. But the great thing about auto animate is being able to show what should happen in a really kind of nice smooth way. And so yeah, I think sometimes it's not so important to be able to do these super tedious things, but you absolutely can if it's important for your user test or whatever it might be.
awesome. One last quick question, and I think this is for most Adobe products. How do you zoom in so quickly and zoom out?
Zoom in and zoom out.
Yeah.
I'm on my trackpad, so I am just like doing this motion.
Yeah, everyone do it. Like, let's do it. Okay. But just to give everyone else, like if you're on a keyboard, it's just basically control plus, control minus to kind of zoom
Mhm.
in and out of stuff. Or there's an actual magnifying glass on most
Mhm.
what's it called? Adobe products, and you can zoom in and out like that. Okay, you know
Got it.
what, Maddie? No more questions for now.
Okay.
Although we're getting a few, so you go ahead and continue.
Okay, cool. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to just duplicate this because what I want to do is do a more custom switch. So I think this is probably something that you guys have seen before. And so you might be curious how to create something like it. So I'm going to ungroup this by doing Command Shift G so that it's not this same component anymore because I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to use these elements, but I want it to be its own component later. So what I'm going to do is actually bring this radius all the way in so it's a circle. And I'm going to do the same for this. And I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so that we can better see the edges. So now we'll do 3 pixels on each side, and we're going to get rid of this. So instead of boring AM and PM, what if we wanted a sun and a moon? So I think what I want to do is actually use a plugin for this. So down below my layers panel, I have my plugins panel where I have just a few plugins here. And this one is one of my favorites to use. It's called Icons for Design. And it's got a bunch of different icons. So I'm going to look for a moon. This is just to save myself some time. And so the weird thing about this plugin is that it always takes you all the way up to the corner of your artboard, and I'm not sure why. So I am going to just cut using Control X, and I'm going to paste it over here. Okay, cool. And I'm going to kind of come over and look at my colors. I think I want to make the background like a dark night blue, and then we'll make the moon nice and yellow and bright. Okay, cool. So this is kind of like our PM switch. And now what I want to do is make the AM. So again, we're going to go into icons for design. Let's find a sun. Let's see.
Sorry, Maddie. So this is Icons by Design plugin. Is this a free plugin, or is this something that you?
It's a totally free plugin. So if you want to explore plugins, what you can do is go to manage oh wait, what do you do? One second. Here we go. If you go to all your plugins, then you'll do the plus button, and I'm on my other screen here. And this is where you can browse so many plugins. So for this one, just type in icons for design, and it's right in the beginning. It's a very popular plugin. And so, yeah, this is an awesome one that I love using. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Now I'm going to grab this sun. Yeah, that's the one downfall. Like, it pasted it all the way over here. Please tell me why. I would love for that plugin to have like dragging abilities. So if you're listening, icons for design. Okay, then we're gonna paste it over here and just make it maybe a little bit smaller. And we're gonna go over and make this yellow as well. Okay, awesome. So all of these right now are different layers. So I'm gonna group them together and make them a component again. And I just did Command G and then Command K. And so now we have it as a plugin or a component. And so now we have the default state, which this time is PM. And so let's make another state and we'll call it sun or AM. And so for that, I'm going to double click in until I've selected on the background circle. I'm going to drag it over and I'm going to make it this blue. Awesome. So now we have sort of this same exact scenario where all we have to do is go into prototype mode, double click on the moon, create an interaction where it will auto animate over to the default state. Then we're going to go back to the default state, double click on the sun, and same thing. We want to go back to the sun state. So now we can do exactly that. So now, as you can see, it looks nice. It's bouncing back.
I like it.
Look cute. It's bouncing back and forth, and it's also changing colors, which is really fun. So you can, again, put your own spin on this type of thing, and you can make it even fancier if you wanted to. So that's pretty much all of the interactions I had to share with you all. But if you have questions, then I think we still do have a little bit of time.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. So I have a group of questions from this one girl, one lady, and I'm going to say, Maddie, these micro interactions are really cool. I love them. It's something you got to kind of plan out and think about. And then it's so great that when you have that imagination of what you want to do, that you have a product like Adobe XD that can like bring it to life and make people happy and stuff like that. So, I guess there was a question about the arrows for the time, right? So are the arrows persistent or not? What does that ring a bell in your mind of what they're trying to ask?
Are they persistent? Maybe they could ask that in a different way.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking more like I guess maybe is the arrows can you go back and forth with them, as in have an on click and an off click transition kind of thing? So when you're clicking it kind of turns white, and when you're not, it stays the same color? Or is it just better to? Yeah,
that would be a little bit tricky to set up because it's two different interactions within the same component,
I see.
or within the same, yeah, like element, I guess. So that
Okay.
might be tricky to set up. That I'm just saying that because I have not played around with doing something like that. There definitely might be a way to do it. But off the top of my head, I'm not sure exactly what that would be.
Okay. And that's probably just getting into like very nitty gritty interactions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So this is more of, I'm guessing this is more of a stylized question, is that do, because you already have the arrows, so I'm not sure why, if you need this, but do you need maybe the 3 and the 4 to be kind of like cut off at the top of the button so that you can actually see, like
Yeah.
tell people that they can, yeah. I think
No,
that's more of a stylized thing anyways, but the arrows kind of do kind of give it away. But
yes. So
what's
I
your,
really like that idea. And that's actually what like iOS does. And I think it's really successful because then you can see which direction it goes.
yeah,
So for this, if you want, I was keeping it super simple since this is the beginner session. But if you wanted to do that, I think it'd be awesome to sort of have like a gradient, so that the 3 and the 5 sort of faded out, even if they were a little bit closer together. So let's say we just had this at 27 and oops. And so we had this 4 here, and you're seeing just a little bit of this, but
hmm,
then you had a gradient here. So
oh
that
yes, okay,
you had it start at white, it was at white here, but it was sort of like that. And
yeah.
so then you would have that on this side too. And so that's what I would recommend if you wanted to make this a little bit fancier.
See, we're getting too fancy, Maddie. Way
Super
too
fancy in
fancy.
here.
Okay, so another question that came in by Heron is it possible to animate something and then add it to a component to simplify to simplify the flow? So I'm guessing what they're trying to ask is, if say you did an animation like this very similar animation with the between the sun and the moon. Could you, after you do the animation, make it a component, or do you need to have it? Does it need to be a component in order to animate? At
So
least,
it has to be a component in order to animate across states, because components are the only things that have states. If you just have a group, it won't like, so we have this, which is a group. If you go into prototype mode, there's no states up here that you can actually sort of use. If it were a component like this, then you start to get these state options. And so that's why it would be, you wouldn't really be able to animate back and forth if it were not a component.
okay, that's cool. Okay, another question:
Mhm.
how can I learn more about micro interactions and animation? So not only about XD, but the actual animation. So I can answer just a little bit of that. Is that one thing you should, I don't know if you've ever followed this, is just learning the principles of animation from Disney. They have a really cool book about that, and just understanding movements and how things ease in, ease out. Like you had said earlier about easing in and easing out. What does that actually mean? So, like explaining that, Disney has some stuff. Like, what other kind of things other than what you had said earlier could you learn about, just like actual animation and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I'm going to be very transparent. I have zero knowledge or background in animation. And so that's the reason why I use XD, because
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's familiar with After Effects, but in order to use After Effects, you do have to understand exactly what you're saying, Andre, like Bezier curves and all of these things that actually make up a natural animation and transition. When it comes to XD, they literally do that for you, and they've kind of itemized it into ease in, ease out, snap, bounce, these types of things that are just like, yeah, and it makes it so easy. And so I honestly, like, I've done okay in my career so far without even learning about the technical side of animations. And so that's not to say that you shouldn't learn it, but yeah, honestly, I haven't dove into it, and I really appreciate tools that make it super easy for me since I'm not an
Yes.
animator.
Yes, I still miss Adobe Flash. I know people probably don't, but I miss it because I used to love making animations and using a timeline to actually control the animations. So
Yeah.
that was really fun for me. But and we still have Adobe After Effects, like you said, and now this program, which is pretty cool. Another question I'd love to ask you is your top five plugins for Adobe XD.
Good question. So this is sort of like my recording studio computer where I don't have all my plugins, but I'll show you what I have and if I can think of other ones that I have. So Icons for Design is number one. I use it all the time. Undraw, this is a really cool one because you can kind of search for different things like maybe I want to search plants. And so it'll bring up everything that, the artist has tagged plants, and you can see all of the colors in your document here, and you can kind of um, create a different color scheme for each of these, and then it will kind of bring it into your document, which is really, really awesome. And so that is another one that I really like. So I'll just show you exactly what I'm saying here. So it's brought this in. All I had to do was paste it, and it's used the color that I selected, this color, and kind of changed the illustration. So really like
So
Undraw. There is a plugin. Let's go into the plugins and see if I can remember. UI Faces is one that's kind of creepy, but I do use it sometimes. And basically
oh yeah.
it takes faces that are like not real, like sort of, what would you even say? Basically like AI faces that look really real. And you're able to use them in your UI design so that you're not like using a person's real face. So that's one that I will use if I have to make like an account, section or something like that. That's another good one. Let's see. Stark is one that I use regularly. It's, if you don't know, it's about accessibility. And so I'm always checking color contrasts and things like that with Stark. And there's another one that comes to mind that is sort of like wireframe. It sort of helps you wireframe. And quick mockup. That's another one I really, really like. I think it's a little bit newer. And yeah, that's a good one too. I don't know if that was five, but those are the ones that come to mind.
No, that's pretty cool. I like those ones. I actually started writing down because UI
Oh,
UI faces seem cool. I wanna
it's
try
funny.
that out.
There's one, actually, now that I think about it, there's one, I don't know if it's Snazzy Maps that has a plugin, but Maps, let's see, Fancy Maps is a good one because you can sort of bring in different maps of areas and you don't have to like draw them or screenshot from Google Maps. If you're like, if a map is part of your UI. So that's another one. Okay.
So cool. Okay, so we're coming on to time. I'm going to give you one last question, and I also want to just really thank you for doing this three-part series with us. We learned a lot about XD. It was really cool,
Thank you for
and
having
I
me.
can't say for the crowd, but I think they really enjoyed it as well, and myself, I really enjoyed it. So last question for you for our thing is, who do you think is responsible for micro interactions? Is it the UX designer, the UI designer, or is it the interaction designer in your mind, and what you think?
So I think it's tricky for me to answer because I consider myself to be a UI UX designer. It's
Mhm.
hard for me to separate the two, to be honest with you. And so maybe I'm not the best person to answer the question, but I think certain interactions that are a little like animations that are just for fun, maybe that's for a UI designer. But if there's something where, like this, for example, where it really is helping the user accomplish their goal and understand what is sort of being asked of them, that's something that actually is integral to the UX. And so I don't know if that answers it, but I think somewhere along the way it needs to be thought of. So if you are a UI only designer, then I would make sure that these things are being talked about if they're not in your process.
Well, because you kind of need UX designer to kind of understand, is this good for is this good for the user? Is it not good for the user? And then you have to have a little bit of UI to actually design it, and then you have to learn a little bit of interaction to actually understand the animation. So it's really good to have like kind of like a balance of all these things, but
Yeah.
it really depends on where you're working and like if you're designer of one or designer of many with a bunch of designers. So it's really interesting. So with that being said, thank you so much, Maddie. It
Thank
was
you.
wonderful talking to you and learning so much about micro interactions and foundational research basics, just everything, right? So it was really cool.